The What to Next podcast helps you build a TBR of future favorite books. In each episode, Lori and Maine interviews authors and book influencers to recommend books they loved for you to pick up today. If you're an avid reader, always looking for your next great read, then the show. Hi, Juliette. Welcome to What to Next podcast.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here.
So happy to have you here. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I have been writing for about 15 years. I have 4 kids. I live in a suburb outside of Boston, and I am sort of an obsessive gardener. I'm just out there digging in the dirt as often as I can.
So what kind of gardening do you do? Do you do like have a herb garden or like flowers or like any preference or?
You know, I don't have a lot of sun, so I'm always sort of fighting with, what can here's this beautiful plant, but it's full sun. I can't do that. Got a lot of hostas. I'm really into hostas,
okay,
epimediums, some of these wonderful shade plants.
Yeah, and I think you're up in Boston, so you're obviously you also have winter. So.
Yeah, except it got really warm today, so that was really nice.
Yeah, I remember when I would live up north, and I was like, oh, you got winter, so you plant in the fall to get something in the spring, and then you gotta like it's a test of patience for sure.
It sure is. Yes.
So, awesome. So let's talk about some of your latest release, the half of it. What is the elevator pitch?
The elevator pitch is Helen Spencer's life has been veering off course for about 40 years. A domino effect of cascading regret that began one romantic night in the woods with Cal Crosby. Now, 40 years later, they have the chance to untangle the mess and help each other figure out where to go from here.
Oh my gosh. This is very exciting. So what was the favorite part of writing this book? Or was it difficult? Was it easy? Like, what was the process of writing it?
What was really crazy was that I wrote it during the pandemic. So it was August of 2020 to March of 2021. So I wrote it really fast because I didn't have anywhere to go and anything to do other than write. And my garden was asleep, so I couldn't even do that. So I just was, I was with these 2 characters, Helen and Cal, every day. And that was really fun to be very much immersed in that story.
Yeah. So that's like, so did you write outside before the pandemic? Like, did you go outside to like write in coffee shops or any places?
Sure.
Like it's a shock to be like, okay, I'm indoors now.
Right. I would go away, have a writing group, but we would go away for a weekend and we'd all go off and write and then have dinner together. Or, especially when my kids were little, sometimes I'd go check into a hotel for a couple of days, just, not anything fancy, just like a room where no one was going to, be saying like, where are my cleats? And, can I have lunch money? And, that kind of thing. So, I was really kind of holed up at home. But it was good because I really was able to just sit down and dig in and not go anywhere,
Yeah. So now that we have moved past and the world has opened up, I want to say like we're past the pandemic, but we're kind of like a post-pandemic world.
Yeah, I think so.
What does your writing looks like now? Like you're writing, what you're writing, has it affected or is any what were some of the post-pandemic,
Well, I mean, one of the things that's not, when I wrote the half of it, we were in the middle of it. And so I didn't feel like it was authentic to sort of act like a world where it had never happened. So the story is not about the pandemic in any way. It's, I've kind of avoided COVID, but COVID happened in the story and it did have an effect on people. And so Helen, the main character, her son-in-law owns a bakery in town and they're just sort of getting their feet under them again after things, they nearly closed down. So there's a little bit of that. Now, I've actually just finished another manuscript and I didn't feel the need to put COVID in at all because it felt like, we're it's there. It's, it's still there, but I don't have to talk about it. And that was kind of nice.
Yeah, I think like in some ways we're moving past like these major, because we had so many traumatic events happening in the
Yes.
span of 20 years, like that remove, I think like our mind has gone like circular. I'm like, okay, let's just move past it.
Just keep going.
Let's just
Right.
keep going. Like what else can happen,
Right. Right. Right.
So I
Yeah.
think in some ways, like we use writing as an escape, like we acknowledge that it happened, but it actually helped,
We can
we're
sort of
living a
put it in
different
its
world.
place.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
so what kind of books do you tend to read? Let's talk about your reading life.
I really, I love contemporary fiction and historical fiction. I
Mhm.
don't read much genre fiction,
Mhm.
occasionally, but I sort of stick to more sort of family drama or relationship fiction, and I love historical fiction too.
Love this. And so what kind of historical fiction do you go? Do you go World War II, or do you have like specific time period that you're like, if it
You know what?
comes, I read
I
it?
gotta be honest, I don't love World War II.
Yeah.
It's just not quite my jam. I love stuff about, one of the books, that I really loved recently was The Exiles by Christina Baker Klein. And it's about women who are in England I think it's just around the turn of the century, the 19th century, and they are being transported to Australia because they're convicts, and it's a very gripping story. So I can, sort of more about that. I also loved Jojo Moyes' The Giver of Stars. That was a huge hit for me. About basically a library in the Appalachian Mountains.
Yeah.
That's a horseback library. They would bring the books around on horseback, and that
Yeah.
was also fantastic. I really enjoyed that one.
I love this. And so let's talk some book recommendations. How many books to recommend your listeners to pick up?
Books to recommend. Well, one of my favorites in the last couple of years was The People We Keep by Allie Larkin, about a young woman with a really troubled past, trying to make it as a musician. Just a beautiful story, really beautiful. I loved A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles. Again, that's a little bit of historical fiction, but just really fascinating, about a guy sort of trapped in a hotel in Moscow, and how the years pass as he's trying to figure out how to live a life where he's really trapped.
Mhm.
So those are ones that I really loved. Another one that I read recently I just adored was Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine.
Mhm.
And that was fascinating. I love, sort of an unreliable narrator.
Mhm.
Eleanor is sort of telling us what's going on, but there's something else going on that we have to sort of figure out, which I just really loved.
Yes, and it's a great book, I would say. And I think The Gentleman in Moscow is very telling. I think it could be very relevant in like, what we experienced recently. We were stuck
Stuck.
indoors.
Yes.
Like, at the time when it came out, it was pretty much like, what would have happened? But now we're like,
Right.
oh, it's,
That
it
could
could be
happen.
relevant. It could happen.
Right.
What will you do with your free time, that you have to, and what kind of world do you live within those walls?
Right. Right. Right.
So, Juliette, tell us where we can find you online.
My website is juliettefay.com. I'm also active on Instagram, at Juliette Fay. There might be an underscore in there somewhere. And on Facebook, Juliette Fay author. I'm on Twitter, a little bit less on Twitter, but yeah, not hard to find. And
And
I'm happy to engage with readers on any of those platforms. I should also say I really love book groups. So if people contact me they choose one of my books for their book club, I will meet with them by Zoom and sort of zoom into their book club meeting, and love talking to books, talking to people about books.
I love this. I love talking about books with you. So thank you for being on the show.
I was very happy to be here. Thank you so much for your wonderful questions.
If you enjoyed this podcast, feel free to share with friends, subscribe, rate, and review the show. This is the easiest way to support the podcast. For a list of books mentioned and other book recommendations, please visit watchrenextblog.com. Thank you so much for listening and happy reading.